Okay, we have with us today Jessie Ransom to speak about learning affordability and Leganto as part of the ongoing Knowledge Day series, Ex Libris 2022 Knowledge Day series. And without further ado, let's turn this over to Jessie Ransom. Jessie, you are now the presenter, and take it away.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. I'm glad to see that you are all here. My name is Jessie Ransom. I am the Teaching and Learning Product Specialist for Ex Libris. I work with Leganto, and I also work with many of the libraries that are using Leganto. So I have a good understanding of both what you can do with the product, but also the ways that libraries, are using it in real life, or the types of things that libraries are trying to do, and how Leganto can kind of help align with those goals that the library may have. And that's really actually what triggered this session here, is that this is the type of thing that we get asked about quite a bit. How can I use Leganto to not only support learning affordability, but also make it very obvious that the library is supporting learning affordability? How can you kind of lean into that piece of Leganto and leverage certain parts of the product to maybe initiate specific projects in your library or on your campus related to learning affordability, and then of course be able to report on the work that you're doing. So those are the types of questions that we tend to get in conversations with libraries, and so that's really what we're going to be looking at in this session today. I have just a quick agenda, although there's not very much on it. We're in the introduction right now. These are the two kind of stories that I'm going to walk through throughout this session. How you can use Leganto to enable textbook replacement projects. So as part of this, I'll start with a brief introduction to this as an idea. I'll show you a quick demo of Leganto and how you can leverage certain features of Leganto to enable different things related to textbook replacement projects, and then some sample analytics reports. And then we'll do the same thing again with this kind of second, I'm thinking of these as two stories. So the second story of how you can use Leganto to measure the financial impact of the library collection. How much money does the library collection save students in their courses is basically what we're going to be looking at in this second piece here. And it'll be the same thing, a brief introduction, a bit of a demo of, different features of Leganto that kind of align with this story, and then some sample reports. So you'll be able to kind of see, how the different, I'm not showing you anything that's probably new with Leganto. A lot of this is just kind of general Leganto functionality. Maybe not as much with the second one, but ways that you can kind of wrap that functionality into these stories related to learning affordability. So that's really what we'll be doing in the session today. Certainly, as we go, ask questions. You can put your questions into the Q&A. I will save time for questions at the end. I probably won't take questions along the way, unless I happen to see them pop up, but I want to kind of get through the contents of the session. I will definitely save time. I will also say feel free to use the chat as well. I don't need to be the only one who is kind of sharing today. I have a couple of ideas that I'm going to share with you, but I would be very happy, and I know everybody else would as well, if you're willing to share some of the things that you're doing. Where have you been successful? What kind of, maybe marketing have you done around the impact of your library collection? Feel free to use that chat to communicate with each other throughout the session as well. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in. So the first piece that we're going to be looking at today is how you can leverage Leganto as a platform to help enable textbook replacement projects. So this is the first kind of story that we're going to dive into. And I'll start with just a quick introduction. I feel like I probably don't need to share this slide. It is absolutely not a secret that the cost of course materials has gone up very significantly over the past several years. Every time I talk about this, I have to choose which numbers to use because there are so many different studies about this and so many different studies about the way that this impacts students, negatively impacts students in their coursework. So just a couple of examples here. These are definitely not the only ones, and I'm sure that these are not especially shocking, but Students who purchase all new textbooks pay an average of $1,200 a year. Recognizing that many students don't purchase all new textbooks, there are other options. They can buy used books, they can illegally download books, they can just not get the readings for their course. So there's other options there. Depending on the study that you look at, what students actually pay falls somewhere between 450 and 600, I should say US dollars, for what students might be paying for course materials. This is still a significant amount for students to cover, and especially when you factor in that this money is predictable. It's usually something they pay for before their financial aid comes in. Financial aid may not cover course materials, so oftentimes this can be one of the more difficult costs for students to cover. And we know that this also ties in with retention, because if students can't afford the course materials, they may not do as well in the course, they may not make it through the course. But the other piece here is the total cost of education. If a
Jesse,
student
could I just interrupt for one moment? Did
Yep.
I correctly hear you mention something about the illegal download of course materials?
Yes.
Could you
Yes.
elaborate a little bit on that?
There are websites where students can download textbooks illegally. I'm not going to make any recommendations here for the site you should be checking, Yoel. But yeah, this is something that happens, that students can download from a website that maybe, let's say, from a country that has different copyright laws, perhaps, or from a website that provides this, or even copying textbooks and sharing them with other students in a way that's technically not in line with copyright law. Well, I know Yoel is listening.
No, I was just surprising that it's really a influential phenomenon going on.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I guess this is a good summary. Textbooks are expensive. Course materials are expensive. I think also I'll just say that this certainly isn't changing. There is a lot of work that's happening in the higher ed community. Many of you I know are very involved in some of this work to help reduce the cost of course materials. But overall, this is still an issue. This fairly long quote here is from an article about the textbook affordability in the time of COVID. That this was even more of a challenge when you can take away some of the alternative options that are available for students to legally get their course materials. Physical course reserves as an example of that. The other financial challenges that students were facing at that time. So with that as sort of an introduction to kind of why libraries are, this is a good opportunity for libraries to help get involved in this. Again, I'm sure many of you are already doing this or thinking about this in different ways, but Leganto is a platform that can really help support learning affordability. Most of that is just kind of the way that Leganto works in general. Leganto makes it easy for instructors to use library resources in their courses. It makes it much easier for students to understand that their library has something that's available for them. There's many, many, many situations where students end up purchasing something because they didn't realize that their library provided it to them for free. They didn't think to check the library website. They didn't know how to check the library website. So Leganto, kind of generally just the way that it works and the way that it builds this bridge between the course, the learning management system where the student is working, and the library who is providing these resources, really this does contribute to learning affordability, to the ease of getting students to those course materials. So what I'm going to talk about now is some specific functionality related to the textbook replacement project. So, textbooks are expensive, but replacing a textbook is quite a lot of work for the professor who's using that textbook. Generally speaking, they have their entire course aligned around that textbook, potentially supplementary materials that come with that textbook. It's oftentimes a very large project for somebody to say, I want to use affordable or free materials in my course instead of this textbook. The good thing about a very large project is that it's also a chance where instructors are looking for help and are happy to have help. And the library is well positioned to help with these types of projects because you provide a significant number of resources that align most likely with many of the topics that are being taught in the course. Librarians, have expertise in searching for materials, evaluating those materials, and then Leganto can be used to kind of pull all of this information together, organize it in a way that makes sense for the student. So we're actually going to look at two different possibilities here for how the library can use Leganto to help support these textbook replacement projects. And the first one that I want to look at is the possibility of creating curated content lists. So in this case, we're talking about lists that are not necessarily for a specific course, or these are the resources that you're supposed to read for this course. You can create lists in Leganto that are subject-based lists, as opposed to courses tied to a reading list. I know you can use LibGuides or other options for this as well, but I want to point out that Leganto is an option for curating together these different lists of resources. I'll just expand this out a little bit. I just kind of created a sample list for us today, and I realized my list has a pretty big typo here, the first one. I'll just fix this while I'm talking. But you can you can use Leganto to pull together these different types of resources. I have this organized into, a couple of different topics, sort of general OER resources, open educational resources, psychology specific OER, OER authored by, I'm working at the hypothetical Alma University right now, but OER authored by our professors or used in our courses, potentially breaking down kind of different subtopics within this. But you can see how we could potentially use Leganto to kind of pull together this list of resources. And like I said, I know you can do that in other places as well, and many of you probably already are doing that in other places as well. So I'll talk a little bit about what you can do with Leganto specifically that might kind of make you think about this in a different way. So first of all, using regular Leganto functionality, you can pull together all different types of resources into a single list. I actually don't have a huge variety on this list because I just kind of wanted some sort of sample here that we could use. But you could have books, you could have websites, you could have videos, OER, all different type of content on this list. You can, of course, search your library collection and pull these things together. Perhaps you, have a project right now to purchase textbooks for courses, or purchase books that can be used as textbooks for courses. This would potentially be a way to pull together that list of resources and organize them and share them with your instructors who are teaching that content. Lists in Leganto, like I said, don't have to be tied to a course. Of course, there's different options for how they would be published as well. So this list is something that anyone authenticated would be able to see. So all of my instructors at my university would be able to see this list of resources. I also can, work with this in different ways. So if I have created this list of my general OER websites, repositories that I want to share with my faculty, I could then, take that section here and copy the section itself into another list. So there's ways to kind of reuse your work. I could duplicate this list and change it for a different subject area if I wanted to. So as the person building this list, you could duplicate it in different ways. As the instructor working on this, I'm logged in as a librarian right now, just so you know, so we have a slightly different view of this. But if I was an instructor who was not an owner of this list, but just had found it or had a link to it, I would still have the option to copy any of these resources to my collection. So it's a way to just expose this content to your instructors and make it easier for them to use these resources in their own courses. If I'm just, using it directly, this OpenStax one isn't a great example, but if I wanted to go down here to, for example, this textbook that's being used in other courses, another professor could just copy that and then add it to their own courses as well. But the other thing we can do here is add in the list of collaborators. So you could potentially have the library being the one curating this list, but you're not limited to that with Leganto in the way that you might be with some of the other, platforms that you might be using to curate content now. If we have some professors or some instructors who are working with OER, or maybe who are using library resources in their courses, they could potentially be adding to this list as well, and just essentially establishing a list of free content that is available to students that aligns with the subject matter. Depending on how you want to think about this, it could be very broadly psychology, like I have here. It could go much more specific into different areas of the subject, or things like that. But there's a lot of flexibility with Leganto in terms of just curating lists of resources. So that's one kind of way to think about how the library can help support textbook replacement projects with Leganto. The other one, though, is actually, the other one I want to talk about is actually working to help build the list of new resources, replacing the textbook. Because this does, as I said, tend to be difficult. There are certainly times where you are teaching this physics textbook and this OER physics textbook exists, and you can kind of replace it wholesale. But there's also a lot of situations where that's not the case, and there's not just a one-to-one replacement for this textbook. And instead, you're looking at compiling together a lot of different resources from a lot of different places to replace the content of that original textbook. And that's kind of what I want to talk about with this sample list here, where you can see I have this broken down into the different topics that might be, the topics of this course that I'm teaching or that somebody is teaching here. So again, we're talking really about the same functionality that Leganto always provides, but a way to think about that specifically in a textbook replacement project. And here, where I actually want to start is with this list of collaborators. Because this is such a challenging thing to do. If you're thinking about a couple of different instructors who teach the same course or the same topic, who might be working together to redo this course, maybe they're working with somebody from the Center for Teaching and Learning. Maybe you have a dedicated person at your library who, or maybe that person is you, who helps instructors kind of find new resources, find affordable resources for students for their courses. You can have as many different collaborators as you need to have to work on these reading lists. And all of the collaborators can work to, pull together resources from the places that they may be aware of. You may be very aware of some of the OER collections that are available that have been used, at other institutions. Your instructors may be very aware of the journals that, they like to use, or things like that. So you can combine that knowledge that, everybody has to help build this this new set of resources for the course. We have some Leganto libraries where the library will take the textbook and lay out the list kind of similar to how we see it now, with the sections being the topics or the chapters of the textbook. And then from there, the library can go in and add library resources that align with those topics. They can kind of pull together sort of a basic list of resources, or potentially a very full list of resources about these different topics. And then the instructor could take a look at that list of content that the library had pulled together and, very easily reorganize these things, add new ones, delete things, save them for a different course maybe, or save them for later. But we can work on the same, again, working on the same list here makes it very easy to kind of look at what we have. What do we have here that's covering this week 1 topic? What do we have that's covering this week 2 topic? Which of these resources is the best of these 5? I have a lot easier process to kind of go through that, as opposed to starting from scratch, starting with nothing. So there's a great opportunity here for the library to, to help with this process of just, helping find materials, helping kind of organize those materials into a way that makes it then easier for the faculty, for the professor to replace that textbook, because it's not something that they need to do, completely by themselves. So at a high level, that's kind of the ideas that I wanted to talk about here. I'll point out here, we also do have some relevant functionality in just the library discussion as a communication channel among all of the collaborators on this list. Maybe I'm working on this with a group of people and I'm really struggling to find something that covers a certain topic. So I want to add a note here so everybody else can see that and understand, or look and see if they can find anything. Potentially the suggestions here as well, although my kind of thinking around what we're looking at right now is that this isn't actually exposed to students at this point. We're just kind of working together to build all of these resources together. You could potentially use the notes internally, like this would be a great one to replace, X, Y, and Z, or this does a good job of covering X, Y, and Z. So it's a way to kind of rethink about this standard functionality of Leganto. You can add all different types of resources. Again, you already know this, but OER is one example. I will point out there are a few things that are in CDI. There's a couple of different OER repositories that have been indexed in CDI. They tend to be difficult to discover, especially if you are looking specifically for OER. They're tagged as, I'm not actually going to do this, but I'm just going to get a list of results so that I can point some things out. They're tagged as open access resources. So the results kind of come up with all of the other results coming from the library collection, and you can filter specifically to the ones that are open access, or see sometimes there'll be that little mark on the results that say open access. So they're tagged in that way. But here I would see just a list of all of the results, and they tend to have a lot of OER textbooks that I've looked at anyway, tend to have titles that are like this, psychology. So they tend to be, sort of tricky to get if you're specifically looking for OER. But we do also have the Cited tool as a great way to bring in resources from specific OER repositories, or again, any other place that you may find it. But for a couple of the different kind of bigger or more popular OER repositories, we've worked with the Cited tool to pull in the information here. So you can see we're getting all of the relevant details about this resource, including down here below the Creative Commons licensing information. So it is probably easier to discover if you're looking specifically for OER content. It's generally probably easier to discover it on those different OER repositories. They offer a lot of different options for searching and browsing and filtering by different levels of content. But once you find those things, Leganto is a really great tool for pulling those resources together and organizing them into the structured list, organizing them in a way that's very easy for students to understand, students to access all of these different resources. Again, nothing new about Leganto, but as you're thinking about kind of the process of these textbook replacement projects, something really important to keep in mind here. Some of you may have noticed that I tagged some of these items as OER. I actually did that for two reasons. The first one is that I added a lot of different things to this list, and I wanted to kind of keep track of which ones were OER. So I did that for myself. You can see here OER Commons, OER Commons. So I wanted to just kind of keep track of this for myself. But I do also want to talk a bit about reporting as well. So I created a couple of sample reports that we're going to look at, and one of them happens to use this tag, this OER tag. So you'll see that as we go into the sample reports, which we'll go ahead and do right now. Once you are using Leganto for these textbook replacement projects, it will be very important to also think about how you're going to share your successes with your community, whoever your community may be. I'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but you'll want to think about ways to share the news, the good news about what the library is doing and how the library is helping to support learning affordability initiatives on your campus. So what I have here is just a couple of they're all fairly short sample reports here, or small, I should say, sample reports, just to kind of give you an idea of the ways you can think about this. So the first one that we're looking at right now, I'll zoom this in a little bit more, is zero cost lists. So a way to kind of tag your courses or your reading lists as, this course is free. Students don't have to buy the textbook. Maybe the library has a dedicated program where, you give a grant to an instructor, and then you want to track the work that they have done, so that you can measure that in the future. So you can use Leganto for that. The way that I did it in this sample report that we're looking at is I added a searchable ID to the course that says just zero cost, and then I can filter based on that searchable ID. So that's what I've done to filter this list down. Theoretically, these would be the 5 courses that we have, specifically worked with our instructors on to replace a textbook, and now we want to track the fact that we did that and the amount that we have saved for students as part of that. So here we can see that information. Obviously, there's many more analytics, usage analytics, or other types of things that we could potentially report on here. But what I really wanted to get at was the number of students. The active students is the number of unique students who have accessed this reading list. And then we can also see the total enrollment, so the number of students who enrolled in the course. And we're looking at demo data here. I realized my Philosophy 101 has 10 students in it, which may not actually be all that accurate. But you can think about this maybe with your own numbers. You can use analytics as a way to measure those types of things. What is actually the impact of this course? And then here for the potential savings number, what I actually did here, Spark did a study in 2018, and they found that on average, students save, I wrote down the number, $116.94 per course when the course uses OER in place of traditional textbooks. That was kind of the general average that they came up with. And so that's actually what I used here. I just multiplied that as a standard number, and I multiplied that by the number of students in the course. But you can think about that as well, because this is where you'll really start to see, that impact of your textbook replacement projects. And of course, this goes up year over year, because once you have redone a course, then every time that course is taught in the future, or every additional section that uses that course, those numbers go up. And Leganto tracks that, that historical information, or that information over time. So you'll be able to use the analytics data to then measure, we replaced these 5 courses, which have since been taught, to X amount of students over the past however many years, and start to pull together some really nice numbers to show, the value of the work that you're doing.
Do you know, Jesse, excuse the interruption again,
Sure.
how many institutions or how many courses around Leganto are using this OER instead of their traditional textbooks?
I don't know that. I don't know that information. It
Is
would be
there
interesting
anything,
to know.
is there something recorded in Leganto that it could be done somehow? Is there a
This
field or a parameter or something?
There isn't. And actually, this is getting to what I have in these next couple of things, is if you wanted to track like the usage of OER, different options for how you might potentially do that, because they're really just regular citations. They happen to link to a file that is OER, or they happen to link to a website, that hosts this OER, but they're tracked in Alma as, just resources that are available to the student, or not in Alma or Leganto. So there's different ways to think about, I'll say it would be very difficult for us to see at a global scale, but not so difficult, or ways for you to think about you doing this within your own institution. This wasn't actually a plant question, but it's perfect timing, Yoel.
No, also, I can imagine the traditional publishers being a little upset about this.
This is not the battle I'm fighting today.
Yeah.
This is a possibility if you wanted to do something like the tags that I had on that
Uh-huh.
sample list. You could potentially filter. I have this filtered by that OER tag, so then you can track the usage of OER. You could potentially track the usage of OER compared to other resources
Oh,
where
that would be
this
interesting.
yeah, that would be interesting. And this is something that some studies have tried to track as well. You know, do students use this more or less than, you know, other types of resources? So you could track that. Another way you could potentially measure it, not using the tags, is based on the license. I pointed out that when
Hmm.
you pull that in with the Cite It tool, you also pull in the licensing details. So that's an option that's available in analytics, that you could filter to all of the citations that have CC licenses, or even specific ones if you wanted to see that information. That would be an option. And then the other thing that you can do that's kind of interesting related to OER is filter to certain things in the source URL. So you know, all of these things that link out to websites have that URL as part of the metadata. So this report that we're looking at right now, all OpenStax citations, I just have this filtered to all of the ones that have OpenStax in the URL. So you can also track that kind of thing with analytics, which I think is really interesting, and it tends to be quite difficult to understand across an entire institution. You know, where are these resources coming from? What are our instructors using? How much usage are these resources getting? But Leganto provides different options for measuring that type of thing.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you.
All right, so that's this first story. You know, different ways to think about Leganto to help with your learning affordability projects. The next one that I want to go into is measuring the financial impact of your library collections. Um, why does it matter that the library is providing resources? You know, what is the impact to students of the library providing these resources, which are then used in courses? So now we're going to look at this as kind of a general topic, starting with just a little bit of an overview. Some of you maybe have seen this slide. We've shared it in different ways, but I like to share it because I find it really interesting. Ex Libris did a study in, I believe, early 2021 or maybe late 2020. We surveyed instructors and students and asked them a number of questions about how they work with course materials. One of the questions that we asked the instructors is where they find new course materials. And I think that this is not a surprise. What you see here, the web is number one. I am a librarian myself, and the web is also my number one resource whenever I'm looking for anything. I'm less ashamed to admit that than I was a couple of years ago. But you know, the web is number one. Recommendations from peers, doing my own research. The library is very, very low on this list. You know, when instructors are thinking about which resources they want to use in their course, they're often not thinking about the library. It's not where they find new materials or look to discover new materials. So this is nothing to do, you know, this study here is nothing to do with Leganto, but this, I think, is a good indication of some of the challenges that you're probably encountering and working with your instructors, but also definitely one of the challenges that students encounter as they are you know, accessing their course materials and potentially paying for these course materials. I mentioned before that students end up buying things because they didn't realize that their library has them. So I have actually a couple of examples. I kind of wanted to dig into, you know, the implications of this disconnect between what instructors are doing and what, you know, the resources are available through the library. And I started by looking at a couple of university websites. You might want to do this on your own. It's kind of interesting to do, but I just looked for like publicly available syllabi. So these are for actual courses. I looked at the books that were required for the students. This is the information that the student sees pulled from their website. At the bottom, there's a link to purchase this from the bookstore. But these resources happened to all be available at that university's library. So I looked them up in their university's library. They're all available. And when you think about the cost to the students here, there's no indication on what we see on the left that the library provides these resources or that they should search for these resources at the library. I'll say this is really the point of Leganto itself, in case you haven't kind of caught on to that Leganto builds this connection. The students would definitely know that these resources are available from the library. They would see those links right inside their course. Obviously, this is what we're doing with Leganto. But the reason that I'm bringing all of this up in this session is specifically for the numbers that we're looking at here. This is, the cost of these materials for the students, and this is what the library is saving for every student who's enrolled in this course. Or if you put this a different way, the actual enrollment on this course was also public, so it has 50 students. So utilizing those existing library resources, the library is already providing these resources. Instructors do not need to change what they're teaching, just by using those library resources. Students in the library is saving students, potentially over $7,000 every time this course is taught. And this is just one course with actually not very expensive textbook costs. So you can, kind of imagine how this might sort of roll up as you're measuring this across different courses. So this is what I want to talk about in this kind of second story about how you can use Leganto to create this kind of measurement. What is the financial impact of the library collection for students? How much money are students saving by using library resources as opposed to having to buy these resources? So you can also use Leganto to tell this story. Again, this is the functionality that Leganto provides all the time anyway, building out this connection. But it's also important to talk about this and share this story with others. So for this, I want to talk about, let me go to a new list here, and I think it's probably fairly far down, so let me just search for it here. This one is using a feature of Leganto, which if you don't know where I'm going with this, you're probably not using it, which is the sticker price option. So this is a specific feature that is available with Leganto. It's disabled by default. I will point out, I'm going to share at the end of the session, I have a couple of different links to additional resources. Talking about the sticker price is definitely one of them. So you don't have to be taking notes as we go. But this is right here, this sticker price. And the sticker price is actually a field that's part of the metadata for the resource. Like I said, it's disabled by default, but here we can see the field that has the sticker price or holds the sticker price. So what you can do with this is put in the price that I usually think about this as the price that the student would have paid for this resource if the library wasn't able to provide it. This is what the resource would cost to students if they weren't getting it through the library collections. Similar to that slide that I just shared. This is the price of this book if the student buys it new. So here we can see that. So you can put in the sticker price in either Leganto or Alma. The field shows up in the metadata in either interface. There are also, there's the option to pull the sticker price from Rialto as well. If you have Rialto, there's a job that you can run that will sort of look at a set of citations and look them up in Rialto and see what the price is. And then from there, this is something that you can work with in different ways. I think that the most interesting, exciting way to work with this is analytics. So we will definitely do that. But I will also talk a little bit about some of the other things that you're seeing on the interface right here. I think some of these are also just sort of things to be aware of as you start to work with this. There was just a conversation on the listserv, I think last week. So some of you may have seen that. But the sticker price also, some of these two here are crossed off. The other thing that you can do with this is sort of think about how much is covered by the library. So what's happening here is it's adding up all of the sticker prices for all of this list, and it's checking them against the library collections. So we can see that $135 worth is covered by the library. It happens to be everything on this list. But the thing to be aware of with this is that it only looks at things that are managed in your Alma repository. So that would, generally be books, potentially ebooks, although, those are sometimes CDI resources as opposed to things managed in your Alma repository. So this is something to be aware of if you're really planning to kind of look at this kind of crossed off interface here. With the sticker price, just so you know, you can configure who sees this information. So you can configure it so that it only displays to the library. You can optionally also display it to instructors and or students. But if you do that, what I would recommend is, only doing the ones that are actually part of your library repository. We don't have it here, but I'm thinking of this article, for example. This article is provided by the library. It's available through our library collections, and that's where the student's going to get it. But it wouldn't be crossed off if I added a sticker price here because it's not something that's managed in my Alma repository. I just want to point that out because as you start to work with sticker price, you will learn this. So I'm pointing it out right now. The way that I tend to think about sticker price, or ways that I would recommend using it as you're thinking about getting started with it, are really two options, two main options. The first would be that you add the sticker price just for books. I think that's a really good place to start. That tends to be, the most expensive thing for the students. If you think about what they might pay for an article, it's probably a lot less than what they might pay for a book or an academic book. So you could start with just books. The other way that I kind of think about this is that you might choose to start by adding the sticker prices only to the resources that your library actually provides, or are actually available to students. I don't know, like a website, for example, that I'm getting on YouTube. I don't know for sure if that's what this is, but that's my guess. If we're getting a website on YouTube, that's not the library collection. So you wouldn't need to add a sticker price for that. That would be free even if the library didn't exist. But once you start to kind of put in these numbers, that sets you up to be able to then pull reports similar to the slide that I shared. This is what the student would have paid for this combination of resources for their course. They're all provided by the library, or X% is provided by the library. We save students this amount of money simply by existing, simply because the library has this budget that allows you to purchase these resources. And now you have a really interesting way to talk about the financial impact of those library resources, the fact that you've been able to purchase them on behalf of the students. The sticker price, especially if you're not pulling from Rialto, is something that you would add in here manually. So I would just go in here to this book, and then I would go down to the sticker price field and type it in. We'll go ahead and just put in a sticker price for this. We'll say I looked it up, but I can put in the sticker price and save it. So the other way that I tend to think about this is figure out where you're going to start, because depending on how many lists you have, you may not want to go through hundreds of lists and put in these sticker prices. But think about your high enrollment courses, or maybe if you have courses that have a lot of books that are available through the library as opposed to articles, that's a really good place to start. Because again, now we'll get into the analytics side of it. The goal of sort of filling in some of this information is the option to then track that information and share those details with stakeholders at your institution. So here, what I have done with this report is just filtered specifically to the ones that have a sticker price. So I have this filtered to everything that this is not null. So the assumption here is that I've only added sticker prices to resources that are available through the library collection. So I can see, you could potentially see this across individual courses or within individual courses, across a specific department, across all of the courses, depending on how you wanted to look at the data. But here we're just pulling in, again, values that exist in Leganto anyway, the student enrollment or the number of participants in the course. the students who actually clicked through to access this resource. Here you can really see we're looking at demo data, but this one has 6 unique students. So how many students actually accessed this book as part of their course? You can see the actual savings, which is just multiplication. So 6 students, each saved $55. And then also the potential student savings, which is the number of students in the course who could have, used this book through the library collections and therefore not had to buy it. So again, these are where I think the numbers start to get really interesting about, I'll just scroll down here so you can see it. We also have this as a chart. But, you can start to imagine how you may be able to, one, measure this information in line with the actual usage information. Some students will buy it even though it's available from the library. But here we can see the actual unique students who access this book as part of this course. And then, from there, pull together those stories to share with other stakeholders at your institution. And actually, that is what I want to wrap up with. So we are nearing the end here, but I have this quick tips for marketing.
Jessie, we did have a question come in, if I may interrupt very briefly with the question that came in, unless you would like to wait.
Nope, that's fine. We are
Okay,
near
so
the end
someone
anyway,
asks, will that sticker price be available for other courses that might use the same resource, or would it have to be re-entered?
Yes. So this sticker price here is part of the citation metadata. So it is not part of the, let me just open up the screen here. It's not part of the bib record. So if we were to use this same, let's say another professor searched on their own list and added this item, it doesn't include the sticker price because that's tied to the citation on this specific list. But if we use this list again, if we duplicate it, then it's part of the citation metadata and that part is copied. So if you're thinking about rollover, for example, rolling over this list in the future or duplicating this list for 6 different sections, there the sticker price does copy over to the other course. Great question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Is that it so far?
Yeah, no other questions came in.
Okay, great. All right, so let's look at this quickly then. I am not, I originally had this titled Marketing 101, and then I was like, you would probably expect more information in a 101 than I'm going to share on this slide. But I want to just kind of prompt you to think about, I've presented this as 2 different stories related to learning affordability. So I want you to think also about how you would share those stories. And I think it's good to think about this actually before you start, because both of these will require an investment on your library, kind of leaning into the textbook replacement project or leaning into the idea of adding sticker prices. So think about your goals and what you'd like to do with this information. And the first thing to point out is that the way that you use this story will be different depending on who your audience is. So think about who you want to share this information with. If we are using the example of the sticker price, we saved students X amount of money across their courses by using the library collection. The way you present that to the provost is probably different from the way you would present that to an instructor or even to the library director. They have different goals, they have different needs, they care about different things. So think about that as we can share the same story with all of these different stakeholders, but maybe sharing them in different ways so that it instantly resonates. An example here might be, to the provost, you might say, our hypothetical Alma University saved students X amount of money, or the library budget, the return on investment on the library budget is X amount of money. You might tell a different story if the person receiving your presentation here is your boss, your library director. You might tell a different story. If you want to share with instructors the benefits of using library resources on their students, you might have a different story. If you want to share with students so that they can help advocate for textbook replacement projects, again, might be a different story. Definitely use numbers. I'm sure that you already know this, but what I have here is use the best ones you've got. Think about ways to leverage those numbers. Things like, and this is in only one course. You can imagine this, multiplied across your entire department. We have seen the potential savings is this. Looking at your project as, looking at those high enrollment courses, maybe identifying, more expensive textbooks or not textbooks, but more expensive books or textbooks potentially that are provided by the library, because that's where you're going to see, the biggest impact or the most impressive story here. Potentially, multiplying like over a 3-year period, we expect to be this amount. You can use those numbers in different ways. But don't only include the numbers, wrap it around this story. So what's the impact of the number? What's the potential impact of this? What does this mean for students? What does this mean for the university as a whole? How does this help us, look good? And that's actually what I have as the last one here, is help them look good. I got to do a training session, I guess about a year ago now, probably, which was a storytelling session. And one of the big things that really resonated with me is that the person you're talking to is the hero of the story. So if you're talking to your library director, how did they help, save students money? If you're talking to your provost, how did the university help save students money? Frame the story in a way that the person you're talking to is, the hero here. So I thought that was a really interesting way to think about this from a marketing perspective, and I would encourage you to think about that as well. And with that, I'm not going to go through this, but I will share. We'll share these resources with you. There's a video about the sticker price. There's actually 2 videos about the sticker price, and then this document lays out what I talked about today, but also some different options related to ways that you can think about using the sticker price field to measure the impact of your library collections. And then the last link on here is a case study with Cal State San Marcos, and they have calculated that they save students in the first, I think, in 3 years of using Leganto, they save students over $4 million. So I think
Wow.
it's a wow number, but it's also
Yeah.
a great example of telling your story about what your library is doing and
And
what's
that
the
might even
impact of your
encourage
library
other students
collections.
to enroll. So not only are they saving
Exactly.
money, maybe they're
Exactly.
increasing enrollment.
Exactly. All right.
Jesse, we can put
Yep.
this on the Knowledge Days series webpage that we showed at the beginning, and then everyone can access it from there, and we can put a link in the description of the recording, which will go to YouTube.
Perfect.
So, okay.
Great.
So
So then you'll
everybody
have the
will be able
slides
to
and you'll have those
access
links.
this. I'm sorry, go ahead,
No, I
Jesse.
just said then you'll have the slides and you'll have those links. Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So everybody will be able to access this. We'll have the link inside the description of the video on YouTube. Jesse, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thanks a lot for sharing it.
You're welcome. Thanks to all
Are
of
there
you
any
for joining
more
today.
questions or comments from anybody before we start? Somebody says, can APIs be used to enter the sticker price?
I will have to look. I don't know off the top of my head.
If it's a
Um,
citation, it should be because we've got to put in a post on the citation. So,
yeah,
but
I have
yeah,
to
we'd have to
check.
check to be sure before we state that.
Yeah, we'll find
Okay,
out.
so thanks. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said we'll find out.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot, Jesse. And thanks everyone for joining. We have one more session tomorrow on new developments in Primo V. That's going to be our last session of the Ex Libris Knowledge Days. And thanks for joining, and we will see everybody in the future sessions. Thanks again, Jesse. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.